Joined now by a man who gives plenty of his time and his info to Trade Radio traditionally, and he's done that again in 2018. Chris Davies from the Port Adelaide Football Club. Thanks again for your time, Chris.
No worries. Good to speak to you both.
You got the deal done today. Jared Pollock out of your club in receipt of pick 11. Must be good just to get that deal done now with a full week to go in the trade period of 2018.
Yeah, it was, and that was what we set out to do. And I think, in fairness to North Melbourne, they wanted to get the deal done as quick as they possibly could as well. So for us to end up now with picks 10 and 11, and with a week to go to potentially head up the draft order if we want, is a good outcome for us, as well as obviously Jasper Pittard leaving the club as well. So Damien, I think I said to one of the earlier shows, our preference would have been for Jared to stay, but ultimately, we know where that's ended up, and now for Jasper to also leave the club and take control of the rest of his career, we're comfortable with, at the end of the day, getting up to pick 11.
Yeah. Look, we'll talk about Jasper Pittard's role in this whole transaction in a few moments, but you're referencing there to having picked 10 and 11 and the possibilities around getting up further into the draft. Have you got some conversations going in that front, and are you prepared to share some of them with us?
Yeah, both of those selections, people are talking about them, definitely, and obviously, we're fortunate that we've also got St Kilda's second round selection, which I think at the moment is around about 22, 23. So we've got a pretty good draft hand, I think, with the potential to move up if we wanted to. We won't sell the farm, I guess, to get up if we don't think the players are there that we actually want. But they're the discussions that will happen, with the remainder of the trade period. And as you know, we've got a week now to go, and we'll make those decisions as we see fit over the next week or so.
It'll be a fascination to just watch how it plays out, Chris, along the way. Can you just take us through Jasper Pittard's journey? I mean, it appeared sort of going back 12, 18 months ago that he looked likely to go on a reasonably large contract at North. Well, that was where all the discussion was heading. Then he sort of lost his way in selection purposes to be able to get into your best team. And then all of a sudden he sort of seems to be on the end of a deal that obviously Jared Pollock dominated.
Yeah, well, look, we had a discussion with Jasper in his exit interview, and Cam was really honest with Jasper to say, look, we're probably at a point where we've had a number of other defenders who have taken some steps forward. Jasper's been a fantastic servant for our club and a guy who really cares about our group. So we gave Jasper the opportunity to say, if you wanted to leave the club and search for greater opportunity, that we're okay with you looking at that. And so, we got to a point where North Melbourne had shown some interest in Jasper previously, as you mentioned, and so we decided to, package the whole deal up. We give North Melbourne back a third round selection this year, which will probably help them, I imagine, with some academy targets that they've got, and we get a fourth round selection back next year, which could help with a couple of things that we've got in play for next year as well. So I think, right now both clubs leave pretty happy with the equation.
We're talking with Chris Davies, the Port Adelaide General Manager of Football. Chris, the latest, if you can please, on Chad Wingard.
That's been an ongoing discussion, hasn't it? The reality is that there's been no real change from our end. We've spoken a lot about it, but I imagine right now that Chad needs to make the first call if he wanted to leave the club to let us know, and we'll think about what happens for there. But Chad's contracted for next year, and obviously a player of his quality, we would be reticent in letting go.
There comes a time when he just has to make that call. Have you put a deadline for him?
Not really. Chad doesn't need to tell us that he's going to stay because he's contracted for next year. If he wants to go, then that's the conversation that needs to happen. I think in fairness to Chad, he's remained dignified in his silence with all the media speculation that's been going on around him. I would imagine that if there's going to be a change, that would need to happen pretty soon. But right now we would be progressing, thinking that Chad's going to be with us in 2019 unless anything significant changes in the short term.
Chris, you're almost in a no-lose situation with this one all the same, because you've got a 25-year-old dual All-Australian either staying, or if he goes, your positioning surrounding this draft is going to be absolutely sensational.
Yeah, I guess that's the perspective of saying, Chad leaves the club, but right now, we're doing whatever we can for Chad to be here in 2019, and that's the challenge for us, is to say, okay, well, we've got a player here, as you say, Terry, is a really good player. We want to get the best, out of him. We want our coaches to get the best out of him. If that was to change and he thinks he's best at another club, well, we need to look at that when that comes to fruition. But that right now is not a conversation that we're entertaining.
Chris, just when you refer earlier to having access to picks 10 and 11, on the points system, packaging up picks 10 and 11 equates to points that are actually greater than pick 2 on the draft table. Obviously, the Gold Coast Suns have got that pick, and they've also got pick 3. What would it be that may entice the Gold Coast Suns to possibly have that conversation with you about that transactioning? Yeah,
look, I'm not sure. It's probably more of a conversation for Craig up at the Gold Coast, but I think right now, as you've highlighted and as we spoke about earlier on, we've got a pretty good hand in the second round as well. We've got a couple of second round picks. We've got our third round pick. I imagine that over the next week that there'll be clubs who need to get access to either those picks, and we can help move up our draft order. Obviously, we're keen to move up where we can and where we think that there are going to be players of significant quality. At the moment with picks 10 and 11, we're really pleased that we think that there's going to be two good players, good quality, core sort of players that are going to be there at that pick who can come in and play next year. But obviously, there's a group of talent, and I'm sure that you guys have spoken about previously at the top end, that if we were to want to get one of those, then clearly we're going to have to do something to get up the list.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the Gold Coast have suggested that they're going to part with either pick 2 or 3, but I imagine it would take something of significance, like what you've highlighted, to get up there, and the clubs have got to make decisions as to whether they want to give that pick up as well.
And as you touched on, as Terry touched on, you would have even greater scope if Chad Wingard is to go. You obviously have a feel for this draft and what he's worth in this particular draft on a points or a draft pick number. Are you able to share that with us if Hawthorn or the Bulldogs come to you?
Oh, look, mate, that's something that we would only entertain once we're clear on what we need to think about for 2019. But, fair to say that there is some really good South Australian talent at the top of the draft order this year. Our club has got to make a decision as to whether we want to attack that South Australian talent or whether we're happy for talent across the board. Obviously we like to have a number of South Australians on our list because it is far better and helps in retaining players. But ultimately we won't sell the farm either just to get the South Australian lads at the top of the list. We've got to make sure we're making the right decisions for the long-term health of the list. And if we ended up with just picks 10 and 11 and 23, going into this draft, we think we're going to get 3 pretty good players in that sort of cliff. So happy with our position at the moment, and we'll spend the next week trying to head up the draft order as well if we see fit.
Chris, Carl Amon, it's been pretty public that he's been just exploring his options for his future. Obviously, St Kilda and Hawthorn have been 2 clubs that have been mentioned in relation to Carl. Has Carl or his management spoken to you about if they've really locked down onto what's his next step?
No, they haven't. They haven't at the moment. I mean, Pickers, I heard speak yesterday, and in fairness, we've got a good relationship with Liam and his group, and we're clear with Carl with where Carl wants to head. That's in a general sense back to Victoria, where he can potentially get some more opportunities. So Carl's been a good servant to us. He's put in a good amount of time at the club. He's a good guy. I think where we can facilitate a trade with Carl heading back to Victoria, we will do. I mean, the clubs you've mentioned are probably the clubs who have shown the greatest amount of interest at the moment. But I think, in fairness to those two as well. There's a fair bit going on around the place that I imagine that Carl will potentially get done, later in the trade period if there's an actual suitor for him.
And the other one, I've always thought when Jack Hobbs has had opportunity to play, he's actually played some pretty reasonable footy. I mean, obviously at your football club at the moment, you've got some good young defenders that have come in and really, I suppose, taken his position and role in the side. Has he had any nibbles, or where are you sitting with him?
Yeah, I mean, Homer's another one of those guys we sort of mentioned at the end of the year, a victim of circumstance in many respects, Terry. As you say, we've got a couple of good young key position players who are getting better in Tom Cleary and Dougal Harold, and obviously Tom Jonas has been in the All-Australian squad for the last couple of years. So, we think that there's some real upside in Howard specifically, and Cleary has shown that he's a genuine AFL key defender now. So that's probably pushed Jack into a position where he's fourth in line, and we saw Jared Lena towards the end of the year as a big guy,
very well.
So take some steps forward. So again, in fairness to someone like Jack, who is an outstanding person, we want to make sure that we're looking after these guys as much as saying, look, your depth at our club at the moment. That's not to say that we don't think you can push forward into our best team, but for someone like Jack, mate, you make the decision on what you want for the rest of your career. So I would be surprised if there's not interest in him, because he's just such a quality human, and what you're going to get from a playing perspective. But again, I imagine that'll play out later in the trade period if he's got a couple of clubs who want his services.
Chris,
but I would say if he ends up at our club in 2019, that won't be a bad outcome for us as well. He's a
sure.
quality person who certainly helps from a cultural perspective.
Chris, I suppose just to sum it up and just try to put a bow around it, you've got a couple of people that may still sort of exit your football club. You've got yourself a nice position as it sort of stands in the draft. We haven't got any answers on what's happening with Chad Wingard clearly. Will there anybody else, or is there a likelihood of anyone else coming into the club? Or do you think that will be your lot now, with obviously Scotty Lysette coming in as the ruckman?
Yeah, I think in fairness, it's probably the larger profile ones that'll get done. I can't imagine that there's going to be a massive name that's going to come into our footy club from here. It's probably just working out what our needs are. And we're still speaking to a number of players. I don't necessarily want to go into depth as to who they are, but we might get on the end of a couple of deals from a needs perspective. But I think right now, as you say, we're looking from a draft perspective. We've said that we wanted to hit this draft pretty hard. If you have a look at the last few years, we've gone hard at the draft. If you remember back to Pau Pepper and Marshall and Drew and Attlee, that's probably 2 years ago. We had a crack at the free agency list last year. We'll go back heavily into the draft this year and help replenish our younger player stocks and hope that we're able to pick some players who can really help us into the future.
Chris, appreciate your time as always. We're going to watch this space on picks 10 and 11 and how you potentially move up in the draft order between now and the deadline of next Wednesday. But as always, appreciate your time and context to everything that happens in the trade period on Trade Radio.
Good on you guys. Thank you.